Hey everyone, Kevin here with an April 22nd update on the stimulus package. Today, we're going to talk about some commonly asked questions and answers regarding the newly announced EIDL grants. That's that free $1,000 if you qualify. We'll start with that. Then I'll talk about forbearance, mortgage forbearance, student loan forbearance. We'll talk about credit. Then I'll talk about unemployment, an update to the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act, the $1,200 stimulus checks. We'll talk about some updates regarding that and timeframes, and then we'll get into some FAQ on the PPP. We've got a lot to talk about today, so let's get started. First things first, let's talk about the EIDL. Yesterday, I came to you within an hour of Congress, the Senate, passing Bill 3.5. That's the interim bill that's increasing funding for the small business PPP. But it also did something we were not expecting. The bill doubled the available funding for the EIDL grants. That's the upfront, forgivable, no need to repay money that you could request from the Small Business Administration. And a lot of questions have been flooding in terms of, how do I qualify? What do I need to qualify? And I'm gonna give you a generic overview here, and then let me give you some quick Q&A answers here. From that video, a lot of you have been wondering, do I qualify? Do I need a separate tax structure? Do I need a corporate entity? Do I need an EIN? Do I need a different social? Like, how do I know if my small business qualifies? I just have a side hustle. I do Instacart or Uber. I'm a realtor. Do I qualify? What about the cannabis industry? So here's the scoop. Let's start very, very simply. The EIDL grant is for anyone who self-certifies that they have a small business and they have been affected by the pandemic. So in other words, if you're an employee at Google, but you have a side hustle selling hot dogs with a little cart, and you cook hot dogs or sell lemonade to your neighbors, and you can no longer sell your lemonade or your hot dogs, your small business has been affected. The Small Business Administration says if you have a small business, it didn't say it had to be your primary business, a lot of people have many different businesses, and you're affected, you should apply. And they also say, in writing, when in doubt, apply. So if you're doubting if you qualify, apply. At least apply for that grant. And remember, we're waiting for that application portal to open up again. We're thinking probably Monday, Tuesday, but possibly as early as Sunday. So that's the overview. But if we zoom in a little bit and say, do you need a separate entity? No, you don't have to be an S-corporation. You don't have to be an LLC. You could be a 1099 contractor. You could be working for somebody else's, within somebody else's business. Like for example, if you're a 1099 salon worker, yeah, you work at somebody else's business, but you as a 1099 contractor, you have your own clientele. You are your own business. You are the reason people come to you and they want your service. That is a business. If you're a 1099 contractor, yeah, apply. Realtor, Instacart, I don't care. If you're making your own hours and you're getting paid by a 1099 or you're receiving payment directly from customers, you should apply for the Small Business EIDL grant. Now, don't sue me if I'm wrong. I'm just taking the information I'm getting from the SBA, which says small businesses should apply, and you're going to get $1,000 per employee. Quick reminder, if you have a side hustle or small business, you have at least one employee. It's you. If you have a spouse that works with you, I guess you got 2 employees. And it's a self-attestation, which means you self-certify that, yes, my business has been affected. This is how many employees I have. Here's the name of my business. Done. Joe's hot dog stand can't sell hot dogs. My business has gone down. I got myself as an employee, and my wife helps me cook and wash dishes. All right, perfect. We got 2 employees. We put that into the application, and then we wait and see. Some folks got paid within 2 weeks and they got $1,000 to $2,000. Some folks just got their deposits yesterday and they applied, almost 3.5 weeks ago. So there's really no rhyme or reason to how long it's taking to get these checks out, but I think the big thing for the SBA EIDL grant, this is that extra $1,000 to $2,000 of potential stimulus money, is when in doubt, apply. You got a side hustle, side business, apply. And yes, the same goes for all of you real estate investors who are in my real estate investing course who keep sending me messages going, hey, what about landlords? Do landlords and Airbnb folks qualify? That's your business. That's your side hustle. Yes. Now, real estate just happens to be a very profitable side hustle, which is why I always encourage you to join my program so you too could learn how to go from zero to millionaire, which is what I did. But let's talk now about Nancy Pelosi and the stimulus package and some updates regarding the next one, Phase 4 or CARES Act 2. So Nancy Pelosi was doing the media rounds this morning, and she actually mentioned something that I hadn't really thought of before as something they might be considering in the next stimulus package. She's trying to get funding to make elections safer to prevent hacking from Russia, for example. What's interesting about this is I think the more Democrats push for election safety, the more Republicans are going to resist that, which the next package is going to also include a lot of talk about stimulus checks coming to us. And so my guess is that elections are going to be a big sticking point between Democrats and Republicans. And hopefully, if Democrats end up, letting some of the election stuff go, we could push through the stimulus checks as a negotiation item for the country. And when I say we, I don't mean like Democrats or Republicans. I mean, we, the people, could see stimulus checks pushed through. I'm not taking sides here. I don't care if you're left, right. I'm just trying to report to you what's going on. Now, some updates regarding the existing $1,200 stimulus checks. A lot of folks are wondering, do I have to file my 2019 taxes? The answer is no. I did not file my 2018 taxes. I filed my 2018, and I had my direct deposit information on my 2018 tax returns, and I literally did nothing. I didn't bother with get my payment or inputting my direct deposit info or whatever. It was just on my 2018 tax return, and I got my stimulus payment somewhere around a week ago. Now, the only reason I qualified in 2018 is because I closed a startup and I showed a loss on my taxes in 2018. I would not have qualified in 2019. So, and I'm also not planning on filing my taxes for another 6 months. But anyway, it shows you that, yeah, the 2018 tax return does work. Now, this has also brought up the question, what if you file your own 2019 tax return because you want to save money or you want to get this in right away? Is that going to affect your ability to qualify for things like a house in the future? Which is a very savvy question. And the answer to that is no. The lenders will use your tax return and look at what you say on a tax return to help you qualify for real estate based on what you put on your tax return. Now, obviously, I generally recommend you use a professional to file your taxes, but look, if you overstate your income on your tax return and you're willing to pay more in taxes, the lenders will use that as income. That's the funny sort of double-edged sword of filing your own taxes, especially if you're self-employed. The more money you make, the more you have to pay in taxes, but the more you can qualify for. That's why a lot of us want to write off as much as we can when we're self-employed on our taxes. But let's say you're a laid-off employee right now, or you're a regular employee where you get a W-2, you get a paycheck every so often, and you're just claiming the standard deduction and your taxes are pretty simple. I mean, in a lot of cases, you could file for free by going to irs.gov and then look for their button that says file for free. Most simple tax returns can be done completely for free within like 10 minutes. I walked through one of them in a video. I'll link it down below. It's very easy if your income is simple. When I really recommend you get a professional is when you start owning real estate, when you have multiple dependents or multiple businesses. That's usually when you see that high ROI for investing in a tax professional to help you. Another question that came up was the $2,000 stimulus check package included in the interim 3.5 bill? No. The $2,000 per month is what's going to be negotiated as part of the 4.0 stimulus bill, which we're expecting most negotiations to occur on that within the first week of May. So in other words, we probably got to wait another 10 to 17 days to hear updates on that, but we'll keep you informed. Now, another question, are you eligible for stimulus if you are an H-1B or H-4 visa? And the answer is, you need a social. If you have a social, you qualify for stimulus. Another one that came up was somebody asked in Discord, I received my stimulus check, but I did not receive my $500 for my 4-year-old, even though I included them on my taxes and they have a social. What do I do? So if that $500 is missing, what's going to happen is you're going to get a letter, and look for this in the mail. It's going to get sent to your last known mailing address. You'll get a letter saying, hey, if anything was wrong with your stimulus check payment, let us know, and they'll have steps for that in that letter that's coming. It should be coming within 15 days. So if you got paid your stimulus money on April 15th, expect to see that letter by April 30th, and that should give you the steps for disputing that and potentially submitting information to get that extra $500. Which, by the way, if your address has changed, make sure you go to USPS.gov and use the online change your address form so that you can have your mail redirected to your new address. Quick reminder, today at 12 p.m. Eastern time is technically the deadline for submitting your information if you have children and you're a non-filer for filers like SSI, SSDI, veterans. You really want to use that portal, although by the time you're watching this, it's going to be past that 12 p.m. deadline today. However, I would apply anyway as soon as possible because my guess is that 12 p.m. deadline might end up being a little soft because some tweets from the IRS never mentioned a 12 p.m. deadline. They just mentioned today's date. So even though I brought this and I mentioned this to y'all yesterday, if you have not used that non-filers portal yet to add your children, make sure you do that as soon as possible. irs.gov/EIP. Now, there have been some questions about forbearance. How long does it take for a possible negative impact to your credit to show up after you request forbearance? Mostly it depends on when your lender adds the note to your credit portfolio that says account in forbearance or affected by a natural disaster. Once one of those notes is added, it usually takes about a week for it to actually show up on your credit report. Generally, credit reports refresh every week. And then when that note shows up that your account is in forbearance or affected by a natural disaster, I'm hearing anecdotal reports from folks that are saying, hey, my credit just tanked 40 to 75 points solely by taking on forbearance. And I've heard this for student loans and mortgages, though it's assumed that we might see a similar impact for credit cards as well, though that's not clear. So really think hard if you need to ask for that forbearance if you're trying to preserve your credit. Remember, your credit is super, super important, especially if you want to get into that first house, that first condo you want to buy. Remember, when it comes to real estate, folks, you don't have to buy your dream home when you buy your first property. This is something I talk about regularly on this channel. Start small. Own something. Don't be a tenant anymore. Start thinking to yourself, how can I get from where I am now to owning something? It doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal. It doesn't have to be better. You just need to get into ownership. There's a reason the New York Times says the average net worth of homeowners is $196,000 and the average net worth of tenants is $5,600. It's because homeownership is a very good tool to build wealth. But it has to be done correctly, and credit is very important, which in other news, credit bureaus are now allowing you to check your credit weekly. Apparently, you could go to annualcreditreport.com, and every single week you can now check your credit report to get updates on what your credit status is. Not sponsored. Annual Credit Report is one of my favorites, though. It's not sponsored again. I do also like Credit Karma, the app, also not sponsored. Credit Karma is pretty easy, and it's an app. Pretty fun to do that. Also, I highly recommend everybody now freeze their credit, especially since apparently the SBA has had a data compromise and a lot of folks' information has now been leaked. Thank you, SBA. So that means if you applied for an EIDL grant or you're going to apply for an EIDL grant, I highly encourage that at some point, maybe after you get your money, you freeze your credit. Remember, freezing your credit does not mean you can't grow your credit. It just means nobody else can access your information or open accounts under your information. So highly encourage you to freeze your credit. You can Google TransUnion, Experian, Equifax, credit freeze, each individually, and learn how to do that. Now, Rents and Mortgage Cancellation Act. This is interesting. I got an update this morning that for that act, which basically says all rent payments and all mortgage payments are canceled for the duration of this outbreak, that bill just had suddenly 6 co-sponsors added to it, which I thought was really interesting because one of the reasons I didn't think it had as much sort of might compared to that $2,000 per month stimulus proposal, which is the Emergency Money for the People's Act, was because it didn't have as many co-sponsors. And now all of a sudden, more co-sponsors are jumping onto the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act. So those two, they're gonna be duking it out. It's gonna be really interesting to track that. All right, now let's talk unemployment. Somebody mentioned that they have a full-time gig and they have a side hustle that has been affected by this outbreak. And they're wondering, hey, do I qualify for unemployment? My belief is probably not. That's my gut. But the unemployment rules do say that you are eligible for unemployment and $600 per week if you were partially affected in terms of your income. So if your income was partially affected, you're eligible to apply for unemployment. So I'm not quite sure how that's gonna work out if you've got a full-time job and your side hustle was affected, but it might be something you'd consider applying for. I'd definitely check with your state's unemployment office. Just know that many states are way behind and it's a hassle to go through right now. Though I will also say, the Federal Reserve released a report that the average loss of income for hourly workers is somewhere around $1,600. And yet the average benefit right now from unemployment between the state and the federal $600 is somewhere around $4,000 per month. So yeah, there are a lot of folks actually making more money on unemployment right now than if they were working. So, apply. When in doubt, apply. Now, let's do a quick mention here on the PPP. I've had some questions on the Paycheck Protection Program. The biggest one is, how do you qualify if you are your own boss? And what's very important here is the rule for the PPP states in order to qualify, you have to have 1099'd at least somebody else. So think about this. If you are a realtor, you probably 1099 the guy who installs your signs or that does your advertising for you, or maybe a photographer, somebody. As long as you could show you've 1099 somebody, generally you're eligible as a small business for the Paycheck Protection Program. Those are the forgivable loans. Make sure you're aware of the pitfalls of taking that forgivable money, and mostly like taking the loan and then it not being forgivable. So be very, very careful. But as long as you're aware of those pitfalls, I'll put some links down below for the videos with the pitfalls, then yeah, the PPP is something you should definitely apply for. So if a bank is telling you, hey, you're not eligible because you don't have employees, let them know, hey, well, I have 1099 employees. I should be eligible. And if they don't seem to understand that, go to a different bank. Now, I know it's kind of a misnomer to say 1099 employees, but when I went through the PPP application with Chase, there was a certification that says, I either have employees or I 1099 others. That was sort of an eligibility question. And then separately, they said, great, now let's input your payroll, not including 1099 contractors. You cannot include money you pay to 1099 contractors in your PPP. Every 1099 contractor should apply themselves. So I'd highly encourage you start applying. There are a lot of banks like Citibank that are actually collecting applications, even though the funding, the next round of funding, hasn't officially been signed into law yet. We know it's coming. So hop in line if you haven't yet for the PPP. Now, if you still have more questions, make sure to go to the link down below. Join the Discord chat. It's completely free. There's a section called Stimulus. Put your questions in there. I read those before I make every one of these videos. I go through the list, and that's where I got a lot of these questions from. That is way better than emailing me. Please post in Discord. It's way better. Thank you so much. Make sure to get your 2 free stocks with Webull. When you deposit just $100, you get 2 free stocks valued up to $1,400. They are extending that offer, so make sure you go to that Webull link down below. And of course, get yourself life insurance. You owe it to your friends, your family, everyone. It's very, very cheap, especially if you're younger. I think some folks were applying and they're like, what, 25 bucks a month? Look, I can't quote you life insurance. It's all dependent on like your age and some other variables you put in, but it's so easy to apply. You could do it from your phone within 5 minutes. Do that. And then of course, join me in my programs. I go live every day. The market is open at 9 a.m. and I answer all of your questions privately in a small group. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.